Hello and welcome back to the Authentic Alana YouTube channel and this week's Thirsty Thursday. I am so glad to be here with you again today, sharing some more information, knowledge and insights to help you on your journey of life. I'm so excited to be jumping into child development today and talking about some of the ways that our children develop early in their life and how that impacts their behavior, the way that they show up in the world, and how that can inform the way that we interact and connect with them in different ways. So I'm so excited to be jumping into that very shortly. But before we do that, let's take a moment to check in. So as always, before we jump into the information and knowledge, let's take a moment to check in. So gently close your eyes or lower your gaze if that feels more comfortable. Placing one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly button. Taking a breath in, deep down into your belly, up into your chest, and letting it out with a sigh. Breathing in through our nose, and letting the breath out with a sigh through the mouth. And one more time, breathing in through the nose, deep into the belly and up into the chest. And letting it out with a sigh or a sound out the mouth. Give your shoulders a little rub, a roll, a little wiggle in your seat. You might want to ask yourself, am I ready for this? Or do I need something to help me feel grounded and connected enough? When you are ready, you can open your eyes and return to us here. So let's jump into all things child development. The first thing that I want to chat about when we are talking about child development is that our children develop in a very sequential way. And from a brain perspective, their brain develops from the bottom up. So this is called bottom up processing or development. And basically what it means is that when we come into the world, the first parts of our brain that are developed or are very developed are the bottom parts of our brain that are all about our survival. These are things like us being able to breathe, our heart rate, our temperature control. All of these things are working, our brain is working at unconsciously running for us so that we can survive in the world that we come into. Our brain is very attuned to the sensory information that's coming into our body. However, it's unable, we as a newborn are unable to actually meet any of our needs. We are so dependent on other people. And that is where co-regulation is such a huge, important piece of the puzzle of child development. Co-regulation is all about how the adults in our world, from a newborn perspective, meet our needs to manage all of our needs. So anything that we need, if we need to be cooled down, warmed up, fed, changed, bathed, put to sleep, all of these things we communicate through crying as a newborn. We take the sensory information in, we communicate our needs through crying, and then when we have an attuned adult that comes and meets those needs and regulates us, then that is the dance of co-regulation. And that is such an important piece in child development and how we learn self-regulation. Our actual ability to self-regulate is still developing right up, into our mid to high 20s. In fact, I don't know if you have a look at the world, I would say there's still a lot of adults who cannot self-regulate or who cannot manage their emotions in the world. I find that it's a really important part of my work to support parents and carers and educators and other professionals to understand that actually what the children need is co-regulation to develop that skill to self-regulate. So that's the first part that I want to talk about in terms of child development. Now, next thing that I want to talk about is some of the areas of development that develop at different ages. So from about 0 to 2 years is a really huge growth in our sensory development and our movement and motor development. So these are the things that you can see in the child's development at that age. For example, babies start to roll over, they start to sit up, they start to crawl, and then obviously walk. And this is a really huge growth in a part of the brain that is all about movement and developing those movement and motor experiences. It's also the time when kids are very sensory based. So everything is about exploring through their senses. So you know that as soon as a baby starts moving around, we need to be really careful around what's around the house because everything goes into their mouth. They explore the world through their senses, through putting things in their mouth, through touching, through looking, through hearing, through tasting, all of these different things, smelling. These are the ways that children from about 0 to 2 years of age learn through sensory and through movement experiences. So you can understand that when we want children, for example, 2-year-olds to sit at the table or toddlers to sit at the table, they find that really difficult because their brain, the part of their brain that is undergoing such significant growth at this time is the movement part of their brain. So to be still is really tricky for them. Let's be honest, to be still for a lot of us is really tricky. So, it's not to say that other parts of development aren't happening at this time. Obviously, we are all developing, all parts of us, especially kiddos, at all different parts, at all different ages. We are developing all of these skills and across lots of different domains of development. But this is just the time when most of this development happens, when there is a huge surge in the part of the brain that governs these parts. Now, from 2 to 4 years of age, the limbic system is the part, or probably 2 to 5 actually, the limbic system is the part of the brain that is undergoing huge development, and that is all about emotions. It is also a time when a part of our brain starts developing, which is all about language as well. So at that age, you can see really from 2 to 5 years of age, huge emotions and a huge growth in our ability to communicate, not just to speak language, but to understand language, to understand nonverbal cues, and to move through the world in a more language communication based way. So in this time, we can see, I hear people a lot talking about the terrible twos and, the challenges of this time of development. And it's very much governed by starting to understand emotions, starting to experience big emotions, but still not being able to regulate them by ourselves. This time is also characterized by a huge jump in children's ability to interact with other people, and definitely a change in the way that they interact with their peers. So a 2-year-old, for example, will very much be playing in a solitary way or parallel next to other children. But as they start to move up into the 3, 4, and 5-year-old age, they start to work more cooperatively with other children and playing with them rather than next to them. So as you can see, this is another huge time of development in lots of areas for our kiddos, and we can see that through the way they interact with the world, the way that they show up, and the way that they behave. Now, it is really, really important to remember that when kids undergo huge bursts of development or growth, sometimes parts of their development can go backwards. Sometimes they can have times where they used to be able to do things by themselves, but they actually then want you to do them for you. Now, this isn't to say that they can't do it. It's not to say that they are being manipulative or they are just trying for attention. It is actually all about connection. Now, I want you to just think about a time when you've had a huge growth in the way you show up in the world. Maybe you've learned a new skill. Maybe you've started doing something that you didn't do before, for example, exercising or eating well or meditating. But there's been a growth in some way, shape, or form in your life. And I just want you to notice if maybe at that time other things felt tricky or maybe a bit harder in some other areas, because that's what happens to our kiddos. Often they have a huge growth in one area, but they can, what we call, regress in another area. They can just go backwards for a little while. And change can be really hard. Our nervous system detects change as danger and tries to protect us from it. So often during this time, kiddos need more connection, more love, more opportunities to be seen, heard, and feel understood as well, and seen and heard, and lots of reassurance that they are okay, that you are okay, and that your relationship is okay. Then sort of from 5, 6, 7 years old onwards, the part of the brain that really has a huge growth is the prefrontal cortex, or the top of the brain, which is all about problem solving, decision making, thinking. And you can see that because that's where kids start to move into the school system often, and into a bit more of that more formal learning. So you can see those things happening. Now at this time, or right from conception, all through childhood, the brain and the body and is developing and growing. So we're having growth both physically, but also from a brain perspective, and more neurons are getting created and firing together and wiring together to create these experiences and this growth in development over so many areas. And we can look at development, child development, from a lot of perspectives. We can look at it from an emotional perspective around emotional development, supporting being able to feel co-regulated and, developing into self-regulation, being able to understand and recognize emotions and manage these as well. We can look at social interactions and social development and how kids develop in that way. We can look at play development and how their play develops from when they're really young, with all of this exploratory sensory play, up to some really complex role plays and imaginative play as they get older. We can look at language development and how this develops not only in our spoken word, but also nonverbal communication. We can look at physical development, both from a gross motor perspective, big movements like running and walking and throwing balls and kicking and these types of activities, but also from a fine motor perspective, from being able to put together Lego, Duplos to Legos, and being able to write and create and make things that are more smaller and using pieces that are smaller. So there are so many ways to look at child development, cognitive development as well, the way that our brain develops and how we learn, and how that gets increasingly more complex as we get older. There are so many ways to look at development and child development. But the key points that I want you to take away from this Thirsty Thursday is that our children have periods of time when they have a big growth generally in one area of development at different times. I want you to also take away that the children's brains, or all of our brains, develop from the bottom up. So the lower parts of our brain that are all around survival and emotions develop before our thinking brain. And as I said, that thinking brain isn't fully developed until we're up into our mid to late 20s, or, longer for some people. It also is really important to note here, as I talk about that there is a huge growth in teenage years around developing, again, another period of developing their sense of self, of starting to differentiate from the family, and a huge pruning in the neurons that fire together, that wire together, in their brain. So at this time in the teenager's brain, they are pruning away unconsciously. Their brain is pruning away all the things that they don't need anymore. So for example, if a child has been learning piano and then all of a sudden they stop. In the teenage years, the neurons that have wired together around the piano and around learning the piano will start to disintegrate because they're not using it anymore. So use it or lose it is a term that we can often hear. So let's take a breath. That was a lot. Child development is so complex. So there are so many parts to it and so many ways to look at it. But the main point is that our children's brains develop first from the bottom up. First, they develop around survival and emotional development before the thinking parts of their brain come online. So when we're expecting children to be able to think logically, to plan out things in a really logical and adult type way, often our expectations aren't meeting their actual developmental capacities. It's also important to remember that different things impact development. So sometimes children's development can be a bit all over the place. They can be really good in some areas and not so good in other areas. Sometimes their development can really, shoot forward, and then we might see some regression. And it's not this linear process that we can just chart. Although there's some developmental guidelines, there are so much individual there's so much, everybody's an individual, and there is so much individual difference in these things. But the important thing to remember is that we're looking at children from an age appropriate expectation level and developmental level, but also from a developmentally appropriate level. So if our children are actually working at a younger age than what they actually are, that we're looking at that as well. So how does this impact the way that we parent our children, or we support our kids in our care, or the ways that we interact with our kiddos? Well, it's important to just look at which area of development might be happening for them at any given time and how that's impacting their behavior and the way they're showing up in the world. It's important to think about if they're having a big growth in development, and if that is, showing up in a way where they need more of us. They need us to be more connected, more supportive, more experiences being felt, of feeling seen, heard, and understood. Because if we can give our kids those extra bits of attention, connection, and feeling seen, heard, and understood and loved at those times, then we can help them move through these changes and transitions with more ease. I am going to drop a couple of charts of child development in the description for you to check out and have a look at to help you understand this. And also, if you've got any questions, please drop them in the comments below, or feel free to reach out via email. That is also in the description as well, because this is a really complex issue, and in a 25 minute video I could not possibly get all of the information across. But hopefully that's given you a little bit of an overview, a bit of an idea of how our kids begin to develop early in their life, and some of the areas that we need to look out for as we navigate this space of huge change and transition for both them and us. Thank you so much for being here today with me to learn and dive into a little bit more about child development, how our children show up in the world, how they develop, and how that impacts how we see them and our expectations of them. It has been my pleasure sharing this information and knowledge with you. This week, I've been so excited to be launching my new Healing Hands Help Hearts community. If you are interested in being a part of that community and getting more information, knowledge and insight, more nervous system regulation techniques, and a community of like-minded people to share that with, feel free to jump into the description where there will be a link to sign up to my email subscriber list, and where you can find all information to do with that community. I'm so excited that that is launching. My launch week finishes tomorrow. There are some special bonuses there for people who sign up by the 31st of October. And I would love to have you as part of my community. So that is in the description. But if not, I will continue to enjoy spending this time with you on a Thursday with our knowledge and insights for Thirsty Thursday, on a Tuesday with our nervous system regulation techniques on Try It Tuesday, and of course celebrating all our wins, no matter how big or small, on our weekly wins on Sunday. Thank you so much for being here with Thirsty Thursday today. Feel free to like and subscribe so you get all information authentic Alana and you're the first to find out. Thank you so much for being here again today. I hope you find lots of glimmers of connection, lots of moments of ventral vagal safety, and lots of co-regulation in your week ahead. Thanks again.